If I may ask Senator Yamashita if you can lead us in prayer.
I forgot. During this time of Thanksgiving, we thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving us the courage to dig deep and to find the courage to do what is right, to find the right way to do things, to realize that leadership is about being truthful, that leadership is about doing what is right for all of our families, for all, for getting the big picture, for looking at all of the data, for working with each other, and particularly when tough decisions are in front of us, that we again focus and do what is right for our island community. We also thank you for an election and their results that one more time tells us that our people are paying attention and they do care. And at this time, we give thanks to everybody who has served in the 31st Guam Legislature. It has been a most memorable journey, and every single senator serving today has made it what it is, and it has been a very, very good time to give thanks for. With this, Heavenly Father, we thank you. We ask you for your blessings and your strength as we proceed with this session. And this we ask in your name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Senator Palacios, can you lead us with the recitation of the Inifresi?
Inifresi. Gini ni mastat kilo, gihinasokko. Imastat kalong di corazon ho. Jeni mas figura ni na sinyaho, u fresin maisajo, para bay hu protege, janu defende, ihinengi, hi kultura, i lingwahe, i airi, i hanum, jani tanut samoro, ni irin syakko, diretso gini na asjo ustata, este u afidma gihilui Biblia, jan ibandirahu, ibanderan guahan.
I'd like to ask Senators Munya Barnes to lead us with the Guam hymn and Senator Sam Mabini with the national anthem.
Nogi chamoru, urita nota, kantai matunanya, itodu ilukat. Parahi honra, parahi gloria, abibahi slasen para. Parahi honra, parahi gloria, abibahi slasen para. Todu I tempu I pas parahita, dan gini langit na bendition. Contrite peligro na fahansapulham, Zeus protect Island Guam. Contrite peligro na fahansapulham, Zeus
Thank you, Senators. Can I ask the clerk to please take roll call?
Senator Tom Ada. Senator Tony Ada. Senator Frank Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Guthertz. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Wampet.
Geiger.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, wish to report there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and good morning. I move that we excuse the senators that are not yet present in today's session.
No objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, I move that we approve the Legislative Journal dated 10/1/12 and 10 October 1st, 2012, and October 23rd, 2012, all subject to corrections.
Without any objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are messages from Imagalan Guahan, and I move that they also be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
And there are reports of standing committees, Madam Speaker, and I move for the same.
So ordered.
There are no reports of select committees, so under item 12, introduction and first reading of bills and resolutions, I move that bill number 527-31 to 533-31 be given its first reading,
No objections, ordered.
as well as resolution number 577-31 to resolution numbers 602-31 be also given its first reading.
No objections, ordered.
And I move that certificate number 176 through certificate number 185 also be given its first reading.
No objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, my first motion is that any bill or any resolution rather or certificate of commendatory or condolence in nature that's introduced for the duration of our session, that it be automatically adopted, and that the clerk and the legal counsel work with the sponsor, and that all of our colleagues be co-sponsors of those resolutions or certificates.
No objections, ordered.
And Madam Speaker, the Committee on Rules met yesterday, and we have set for ourselves an agenda containing 25 items and several legislative concurrences. And it's customary that when we get to the second reading file, if in the event an author, the sponsor of the bill needs more time or more information is pending, I move that that bill be set aside, not go to the bottom of the second reading file, but it be set aside, and then once the sponsor indicates that they're ready or that information has become available, that you proceed to that particular agenda item.
Objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, my second motion, I think that's my third motion. I move that notwithstanding the objections of Imagalan Guahan on the matter of vetoed bill 413-31, an act to repeal and reenact chapters 1 through 20 of Title III GCA, I move that that be up for consideration of an override with some discussion.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I know we have a very aggressive agenda, and I also appreciate that motion to consider the override of Imagalan Guahan on the agenda, indicating that this is not the only thing that we can do in this body, but also indicating that this is equally important for us to do in this body. And if you recall, in the beginning of this term, we passed a bill that required the Guam Election Commission to go through the entire Guam Code annotated with respect to how we conduct elections here on the island, and to submit to the legislature their recommendations. And those recommendations were submitted to us, and it was introduced and sponsored by our Oversight Chair of Election Reform, and it was given a number 413-31. That bill proceeded through the legislative process. I want to thank the Oversight Chair for having a series of meetings with the Guam Election Commission, and I also want to thank this body for having a session that I believe was a week long, where we were in the Committee of the Whole, and we had members of the Guam Election Commission present to us what their findings were in a subcommittee, in a bipartisan subcommittee that listed all of the election irregularities surrounding the 2010 election. And Madam Speaker, I know you recall, I know our colleagues will remember, that it was the commissioner who said that in the 2010 election, there was several hundred voters that were purged from the voter listing, and they were purged illegally. They were purged illegally because these voters were not informed by law and by due process of what's required in order to take a voter off the voter registration. We also learned that there was a series of irregularities with respect to how the election was conducted, and all these appearances of improprieties that were not only speculation, Madam Speaker, but it was confirmed by the Guam Election Commission themselves. And so there was opportunity to put several amendments into that bill that we called for an audit of the 2010 election, and recognizing that in order to move forward, we have to recognize first where things went wrong, whether or not the results were really reflective of the mandate of the people of Guam. And it wasn't in any way wanting to overturn the 2000 election, but just recognizing what the true will of the people were, and then letting democracy take its course from there. And so we passed a bill, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, it was passed along party lines, and then it was subsequently vetoed by the administration. And as a result, this vetoed bill, has been sitting before us since April 3rd of 2012. And given what transpired over the last 2012 election, Madam Speaker, given that there were several hundred votes in one precinct alone in Agate that wasn't initially counted, there was problems in the Ganya Heights precinct where the tabulation machine picked up, gave everybody 50% extra votes. And if you recall, I want to publicly commend Senator Palacios for going to that election commission meeting and demanding, Madam Speaker, that every single vote cast shall be counted. And although I came in number 15, I joined Senator Palacios to say that regardless of the outcome of my own election race, it was more important for me to make sure that every vote was counted, even if it changed the outcome. And I did that publicly, Madam Speaker, just to show that I will never, ever want to serve if there was any question as to whether or not I'm serving pursuant to the mandate of the people. And that's what this election reform bill is all about. Unfortunately, some try to make it an issue of personality over policy. And I'm hoping that our colleagues take control of this issue again, take control of the public dialogue, and say that it's a matter of policy and not personality as to why we want to move to override it. We want to move to override this bill because had this bill been signed into law, the Guam Election Commission would have had the legal mandate and the authority to conduct the elections in a manner consistent with how we saw fit pursuant to the Guam Election Commission's own recommendations. Now, I want to recognize the new executive director and the board that's there for doing a lot and moving several steps in the right direction. I want to recognize that those steps have been made. I want to recognize that notwithstanding this bill becoming law, there was a series of election reform measures that were passed individually by this body that kind of gave a general outline and mandate of how they're to proceed. But one of those things that was contained in this bill that wasn't law yet is the kind of tabulation machines that they have to procure. And Madam Speaker, we saw in this last election, the problem is the tabulation machines. And unfortunately, not enough resources or attention was given to the Guam Election Commission in order for them to conduct elections in a manner that's free and fair, in a manner that will get the results quickly but accurately. The current tabulation machines they have now, they're still using floppy disk. I don't know how many of us actually seen a floppy disk at this for the current up and coming generation. It just goes to speak of how antiquated the system is. But Madam Speaker, I really appeal to our colleagues to really consider, and let's move for the override. Let's have the Guam Election Commission implement the tenets of Bill 413 if it becomes law through this override. And let's get on with the serious business of reforming the manner in which our elections are conducted here on the island. Let's bring this discussion back to it being more about policy rather than personality. And it's unfortunate, again, that some have made this about personality, which that wasn't the case at all. Again, it was by the Guam Elections Commission's own findings and their own testimony before us, where they talked about how those irregularities occurred over the 2010 election, and how we seen for ourselves, Madam Speaker, the irregularities conducted and resulting in the 2012 election. And so I, again, notwithstanding the objections of Imagalan Guahan, I move that we place veto bill 413-31 in the voting file. And I appeal to our colleagues. I know that this is an extremely difficult decision to make, regardless of what side of the issue you're on. I know that it's an extremely difficult decision to make. And my prayer this morning is that we move to override this bill, and then again we get on with the with how the 2010 election was conducted. We address those irregularities. We recognize what happened in the 2012 election, and that by having this bill become law, we also send a strong statement that we recognize our voters' rights to free and fair elections, and that anyone serving in positions of authority pursuant to our democracy are really serving because of the true will of the people of Guam. And this bill would provide those bases to which we can accomplish all of these goals. And I thank you for the opportunity to present this bill.
Notwithstanding the objection of the governor on the motion to send Bill 413 to third reading file, no objections? So ordered. Senator Respicio, you still have the floor.
Madam Speaker, I'll do the, I want to yield to our Oversight Chair of Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary to move the appointment of Ms. Maria Teresa Senzan Dueñas to serve as a judge, Superior Court of Guam. With his committee's recommendation to do confirm, I want to respectfully and collegially ask that the Oversight Chair make this motion.
Senator Palacios, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that the nominee for the Superior Court Judge, Maria Ascenzon Dueñas, be moved to the voting file for voting, Madam Speaker, and for confirmation.
On the motion? No objections? So ordered.
Are we going to vote now? No, I
Senator
know.
Respicio has
Okay.
to, other nominees.
Thank
to
you, Madam
send
Speaker.
out. You're welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the next motion from the same Committee on Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary on the appointment of Dr. Lisa D. Flores to serve as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Commission. With his committee's recommendation to confirm, I move that that be placed in the voting file.
All right, no objections, so ordered.
And also from the Committee on Utilities, Transportation, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs on the appointment of Mr. Riley Rigel to serve as a member of the Guam Contractors License Board. With Senator Tom Atta's committee to recommendation to confirm, I move that that be placed in the voting file.
No objections, so ordered.
And then from the Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation on the appointment of Mr. Robert Marks to serve as a member of the Guam Unarmed Combat Commission. With Senator Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes' committee's recommendation to do confirm, I move that that also be placed in the voting file.
No objections, so ordered.
Can we take a 1-minute recess?
Okay, we're going to have a brief recess. Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we, rather than proceeding to the second reading file, that we proceed to the voting file and only vote on the legislative concurrences. And then after voting on the legislative concurrences, the other item remain in the voting file, and that we go back to the second reading file.
On that motion, without any objections, so ordered. I'd like to ask the clerk to please call out the first confirmation.
You wanna read it? You gonna read the confirmation? Okay, we're ready. She has to read the.
Mhm.
What do you want to do?
Just read that from the committee.
Okay. On the appointment of Ms. Maria Teresa Sanzon Dueñas to serve as Judge Superior Court of Guam.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Atta. Senator Tony Atta. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Dueñas. Senator Guthertz. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Juan Pat.
Pungan.
Senator Yamashita. Senator Rodriguez.
On the appointment of Ms. Maria Teresa Sanzon Dueñas to serve as the judge, she received 13 yea votes and 2 excused absence. Ms. Maria Teresa Sanzon Dueñas is duly confirmed by this legislature. To continue on with the legislative concurrence, from the Committee on Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary, and the appointment of Dr. Lisa D. Flores to serve as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Commission. All in favor, please raise your hand. Dr. Lisa D. Flores is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Riley Rigel to serve as a member of the Guam Contractors License Board. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Riley Rigel is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Robert Marks to serve as a member of the Guam Unarmed Combat Commission. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Robert Marks is duly confirmed by this body. Senator Respicio. Okay, we're back to the second reading file, and the first bill on the agenda is a amended bill number 409, and the author is Senator Frank Blas Jr. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 409-31 COR as amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary to the third reading file. And I'd like the opportunity to speak on it, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 409-31 COR is an act to add Chapter 17 to Title 9 of the Guam Code annotated relative to the acts of violence against unborn children, an unborn child. And before I speak on this, I'd like to thank the chairperson on the Committee on Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary, and the Office of the Attorney General, as well as Attorney Shane Intihar, for their involvement in being able to come up with this amended version of a bill that I believe is of importance for the protection of a child that a mother, an expectant mother, is raising with all the love and the affection and the hopes and the dreams that she has for her child. And what this act basically would provide is that should the unborn child be a victim or be of a act of violence, and this is a criminal act of violence, and this is not an act of violence as a result, and I don't want to paraphrase this as being an act of violence, but this has got nothing to do with a medical procedure for abortion. This is just for the purposes of protecting that unborn child as a result of a violent criminal act. And what this does is it provides criminal penalties against an individual who commits an offense against an expectant mother, and as a result also committing that offense against the unborn child. There were many, as you can see in the, I guess in the amended version here, there are many corrections and amendments to the bill as to make it, first off, to address some of the concerns with regards to whether or not it's enforceable as provided by the Attorney General, but also more importantly, is to ensure that when this act is in place, it references specifically to those offenses and those acts against that unborn child. You know, Madam Speaker, I introduced and wrote this legislation as a result of the many conversations and the discussions that we not just here on Guam but nationally have been having on this whole issue with regards to violence of not just our most vulnerable, being our children and our elderly, but I also had this discussion was as a result of what about protecting that life that expectant mother is nurturing and wants the best for. What protections are we going to give to that being, to that child that's being developed? You know, recognizing that the mother will do everything in her power to be able to protect her child. And so in these protections, I firmly believe, and I was hoping for this same belief from my colleagues, that the child too should be seen and should be protected just as well. And that an intentional or criminal act against the expectant mother has an adverse effect and may have even debilitating or a fatal effect on this child that this mother is carrying with all the love and affection that she can. And so I'm sure, and I'm possibly that there's going to be some discussion on this bill, and I look very much to any of the discussions that we have with this bill. But more importantly, is I believe that this is a bill that again will help a mother, an expectant mother, to protect that child that she is carrying, that child that she is nurturing, that child that she wishes all the best for, and the brightest future. So with that, Madam Speaker, I want to thank you very much.
On the motion? On the motion then to send Bill 409-31 to third reading file without any objections, so ordered.
Thank you.
Bill number 445-31, I recognize the author, Senator Guthertz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, colleagues. Good morning. Bill 445 is an act to repeal and reenact Chapter 12 of Title V of Guam Code Annotated, relative to the Modernization and Right-Sizing Commission of the Government of Guam, and repealing antiquated, unfunded, and/or underutilized statutes or administrative rules.
A motion?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a
Senator,
thorough review.
a motion?
I'm
Motion?
sorry. I'd like to move this on the reading file for consideration.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
you may proceed into the
Thank
third
you.
reading file.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a thorough review of the government of Guam. We need to modernize our laws and agency regulations, which are stuffed with antiquated and underused provisions, many of which cost plenty of money to leave on the books for long forgotten purposes. This measure amends a law that I authored in 2007 that called for right-sizing this government. The GovGuam Modernization and Right-Sizing Commission entered into the books still exists. But the PT.1 Commission has yet to be impaneled, and the many problems related to obsolete laws and government structures have only grown since then. Bill 445-31 will refocus attention on existing laws and department and agency rules and regulations and mandates that have accumulated since the civilian government of Guam took effect on August 1st, 1950. This legal audit is critical if we are serious about designing a strategically focused new government of Guam. This first step will help focus on addressing long-term structural problems contained in the way GovGuam does business, and this will help to reduce the cost of our government if done right. Bill 445 makes the repealing of statutes or functions in the law books now and the current administrative rules and regulations that hamper respective government entities' core missions for review, or that are antiquated, unfunded, underfunded, a priority and a regular occurrence. Taking these unnecessary laws or regulations off the books and revising the regulatory process through streamlining will help to accomplish this and provide a more sound structure as we begin looking at a right-sized and modern government of Guam. As all of us know, the administration of this government, executive branch, has attempted to offer recommendations to try to save money and reduce costs in the government. And those initiatives are well and good, Madam Chair, and we understand why they are being offered. However, I believe the approach is wrong. Those are symptoms. The issues we're seeing today are symptoms of a problem. And really, the problems of this government start with all the laws and all the rules and all the regulations that have been put in place since August 1st, 1950, when the Organic Act took effect. There really has to be a thorough review of all of these laws, rules, and regulations. And the purpose of this bill is to put that initiative in effect. If you read the bill, it requires the administration to prepare this review, and it gives timelines for this review to occur. and it requires the administration to forward to the legislature any proposals to repeal laws, amend laws, perhaps modernize certain aspects of certain laws in order to make them relevant and useful to the community. At the same time, the governor in this initiative would be looking at agency and department rules and regulations to determine which ones are onerous, which ones need to be modified, and which ones are no longer needed, that impede the public's ability to do business with the government, to conduct public business with the government of Guam. So that really is the purpose of this bill. Now I have two very tiny, basically corrections to make, and I want to thank legal counsel, minority legal counsel, for pointing these out to me. On page 2 of the bill, on line 27, Madam Speaker, just a little adjustment of the language in the first section. Currently it says, entity shall mean any combination of departments, bureaus, agencies. And I simply want to insert the word after any. Entity shall mean any, insert the word individual or combination. So individual or combination of, and remove the word all, of departments. So entity shall mean any individual or combination of departments, et cetera, everything else stays the same. So we're just adding 2 words and removing 1 word. If I may move on that.
On the amendment then on page 2, line 27, to add a new word, individual or, after any, and delete all. Any objections? No objections, so ordered.
Thank you. And the second minor amendment, Madam Speaker, is on page 5, line 23. The word member should be plural members. Respective members. So add an S at the end of the word member.
Page 5, line 23, after the word member, and make it plural by adding the letter S.
Yes,
no
thank you, Madam
objections, so
Speaker.
ordered.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, so I'd like to express to my colleagues that, there seems to be a rush to change everything in the government and shed this and shed that and reduce this and reduce that. But we're not looking at the real problem. We're only responding to the symptoms. This bill would help us be able to get really to the root of the issues, which are the mandates and the laws and the rules and regulations that really need to be reviewed. Now, that doesn't mean that other things cannot happen at the same time. But this initiative must begin. It's overwhelmingly necessary, and I hope my colleagues will support this bill. Thank you very much.
So on the motion then to place Bill 445 to the 3rd reading file without any objections? 445? You want to take a brief recess? Okay, take a brief recess.
May I request and get the approval of my colleagues for Senator Bloss to be the co-sponsor?
On that motion without any objection, so ordered. Makes sense. So on the motion then to place 445-31 to the 3rd reading file without any objections, so ordered. Moving on to Bill number 459, recognize Senator Munya Barnes.
Sinamasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move Bill number 459-31 COR as amended by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land to the 3rd reading, and I'd like to briefly speak on it, please.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, in 1987, through a land exchange with the government of Guam, Lorenzo C. Rosario, who is now deceased, obtained a real property, a portion of lot number 5024 containing an area of 3,976 plus or minus square meters located in Dedido. PUAG, which is now the Guam Water Works Authority, later constructed a wastewater pump station and related facilities that encroached upon the property. The encroachment was never authorized by the late Mr. Rosario, nor was he ever compensated for the use of the property. In 1993, Mr. Rosario filed a civil action for the purpose of partitioning the disputed property and for the compensation of the encroachment. I want to say, Madam Speaker, that the civil case remained active for over 20 years, and then through a settlement agreement, the Guam Water Works Authority, in exchange for the encroachment, agreed to convey the lot 5168-4 containing the 3,976 square meters located in Tamuning to the estate of Lorenzo C. Rosario. Taking into consideration that 20 years has passed and the family has not been able to utilize their property, the land is exchanged for them, they feel is fair and just compensation. It is this august body that intends to effectuate the land exchange between the government of Guam and the estate of Lorenzo C. Rosario. And we are just doing this based on the final judgment that was recorded in civil case number 1894-93. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, that that settlement agreement was done in the chambers of courtroom, of Judge Barrett Anderson, and that was solidified in June of 2010. All the pertinent maps and documentation and settlement agreement is attached to the committee report. It was attached to the original introduction of the legislation, and if anybody wants to look at the committee report, it's here. So I ask that my colleagues help me close a settlement that was between the government of Guam and or Guam Water Works and the Rosario family come to a full close after over 2 decades of having this property disputed. Sign for your consideration.
On the motion, recognize Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while I'm not going to raise a point of objection to the bill. I do raise a little bit of a, just for clarification purposes, and if the author of the bill can yield, the question basically is that in Section 2, starting page 2, it says that the lot in question for exchange is for lot number 5024-1-R1 new-2 containing 2,927 plus or minus square meters. And in exchange for lot number 5168-4, municipality of Tamuning, containing an area of 3,976. That's basically about 1,000 square meters larger. We just wanted to know, why the disparity, or is there a disparity?
No.
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yeah, I just want to say that the property in question was owned by the Guam Water Authority, and in exchange for what was utilized in the Dedido property, which was 3,000 plus 3,900 plus or minus square meters, that exchange was made. And again, this is just based on the settlement agreement that was worked in Judge Barrett Anderson's courtroom. And if you want to see it, I have a copy of the committee report here and the actual documentation that was submitted.
And I bring this to the light, Madam Speaker, because it does say in the findings and intent that a portion of lot number that contains an area of 3,976. Was that meted out? Was that because Um, can we can,
Take a brief recess.
brief recess, please?
Senator Blas, you're pleased with your conference with the authors. So on the motion then, unless you would like to, okay. So on the motion to place Bill 459-31 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Substitute bill number, we're going to have to skip, we have to skip that first until later. So we'll move on to, Senator Tom Addett. Okay, we'll move down again to bill number 466. Senator Sam Abini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill 46631 to the third reading file. I'd like to briefly discuss the bill.
You place in third reading?
Yes.
And you would discuss it?
Oh, yes, to discuss it, sorry.
Please
Thank you.
proceed.
Bill 466 is fairly straightforward. As we all know, with our limited resources throughout the government, what we need to work hard is to maximize what we have, in this case, funding and budget that we have for human resources. And so Bill 466 is designed to help ensure that the most qualified employees are considered for employment when they enter the public sector. Now, currently, how we measure employment or hiring per current GCA, minimally, a person would have to have their high school diploma or their GED or their equivalent. They would have to have passed the apprenticeship program or certification program in specialized fields depending on the jobs. Unfortunately, those don't necessarily give our employment or the hiring officials a clear picture of the person's qualifications to meet the job specs. And sometimes, they depend on references, maybe, or recommendations, as I said, or perhaps even their resumes or whatnot. What we should be doing is following what not only the other public sectors are doing in the United States, but also what private sectors are doing. We have companies on Guam who like the Bank of Guam, I believe, is one, who are very diligent in ensuring that they invest their monies to hire the best and the most qualified. Because as you know, that in selecting a person who may not be qualified, there's a lot of training involved, there's a lot of maybe dissatisfied employees and who may leave the job and whatnot, and then there's high turnover, and that's pretty costly for any organization. What Bill 46 shows, and if you turn to page 2, is fairly simple. For entry-level positions, what our government would have to do, our employment groups would have to do, is to adopt a formal national recognized foundational skills assessment in order to decide who they would select for employment. Now, currently on Guam, and fortunately, Guam Community College is one of them, as well as our local Agency for Human Resource Development in partnership with GCC has adopted one of those. And so this bill does not necessarily say to use that, but at least we know that they do exist here in Guam. And they have been using this to help identify the skill levels of individuals so that they can help place them or identify the kind of training needs the person would need. So in this case, this bill would require that for all entry-level positions, including law enforcement positions, those who deal with public safeties, and new employment positions at the discretion of the director, would now be required to adopt and take these kinds of skills assessment testing that we are already using in different portions of our public government, our public entities, as well as private entities. So, and just as a background, I know that on page 1, there's a basic description of what we do have existing on Guam, which is called the work key system. And like I said, I'm not suggesting that this is what they should use, but it is something that at least they should probably consider since it's already available on Guam. The current program or assessment system that we have available helps determine the person's level of proficiency in a given skill area. And it helps identify, and by using this tool, employers are able to identify the best qualified applicants for a position. This kind of assessment helps identify that this person, a person, has achieved the level of proficiency needed in order to enter a particular job and perform it well. Like I said, given our limited resources in our public sector, it is in our best interest to make sure that we capitalize and maximize by making sure we bring in the most qualified individual. As an example, if a person were to take this test and a test score would reveal, like let's say their mathematics qualifications test score, let's say it reveals a number 3, and if that 3 is the minimum level needed and required to achieve the kind of task required for the particular job he's applying for, then we can be reassured that this person can enter the job and accomplish the task correctly. And we all know that just because we have a college degree or certification or whatnot doesn't necessarily guarantee that we can enter a job and do it well. There are certain jobs that require certain skill levels. And what's nice about the National Skills Assessment processes that we have is that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs already that have already been qualified, that they've measured, and they've said that these are the basic minimum of qualifications. And so this would allow us, our government, to now adopt something government-wide to assure that who we do hire and rehire or decide to train we can be rest assured that they are the right people, or these are the right kind of individuals that we need to focus on for either hiring or training. So this system that I'm talking about, it can, once we adopt it, or once our government adopts it, does not necessarily have to be restricted to just training or testing at the hiring stage. It could be used to help determine, well, who's the next best person to identify for training or promotion. So this is a first step that we, as a government, can take to ensure that we capitalize our limited resources and we bring in the best and the brightest, the most qualified individuals. Not to mention, Madam Speaker and my colleagues, that this also helps us identify what are the training needs that a person or persons need. Let's say, for example, that in our government, that there seems to be a high need for individuals in auditing or in accounting or whatnot, or bookkeeping area. And if we're identifying through these testing mechanisms that we may not have the necessary qualified skills, then we can at least identify the training needs that they have and then begin to help them so that we can have a better, efficient running government. And I ask that my colleagues support Bill 466. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, is there anyone who would like to speak? Senator Guthridge, you're recognized.
Commend my colleague for her continuous commitment to an educated workforce. I think all of us support that. However, I have to take exception to the belief that this particular bill is going to resolve any current issues with respect to having competent, committed, well-trained folks in the government of Guam. You know, this government was founded on August 1st, 1950. And we have moved forward continuously in enhancing our civil service system. The Organic Act requires, and our civil service law require, that the merit system be the basis of hiring in the government of Guam. And I think for the most part, we adhere to that principle. At the same time, Madam Speaker, the various departments and agencies of this government through their personnel, human resource offices, have developed criteria, requirements, testing to determine the competency of candidates for positions in this government. I don't think by adopting this new approach that that's going to replace or should replace what is being done at this time. I think it could be a tool, and as the sponsor said, some departments use the skill test system, but we shouldn't require it for every single department and agency of this government. Now, having been a professor of public administration at the University of Guam, I am very familiar with the processes and procedures that are used in testing applicants. You look at a department like the Guam Police Department, they have very clearly spelled out specific requirements for applicants for uniform positions in the department. And the testing is grueling. I don't think we would want to replace that system with this. The same thing is true in other areas within the government. So although I appreciate the bill and I do appreciate the intent, and I do recognize that this can be one of the tools available, I do not support mandating this throughout our government. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Frank Blas Jr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if the author can yield to a question that I have here, and this is with regards to the new requirement of, it says for entry-level positions, a formal nationally recognized foundational skills assessment shall be required for consideration for employment. I guess I just want to know whether or not, is this assessment a pass-fail process? Is this a process that would factor into a ranking of an individual? And how does this skills assessment compare to those assessments or those processes necessary to obtain certification from a recognized, accredited, or certified vocational technical institution?
Senator, I think I heard two questions.
Right.
Senator Mabini, do you yield to the questions?
I guess my first one, is this a pass-fail, or is this going to be something that is going to be factored into an individual's overall performance score?
Senator Mabini?
Does this really entail? And a person takes it and they're assessed in 3 key areas. At least I'm just speaking to the ones that I'm familiar with. There's others that are very similar to it as well. And based on that, everybody has their various basic skills, whether it's in math, searching for information, or reading comprehension or whatnot. And a person would receive their grade level or their certain level. In this case, for workies, they receive, they start with bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level, whatnot. If a person were to get a bronze level in, let's say, the math portion, and they want to escalate up to maybe going up to the silver level because that's the basic requirement for that particular job description, they're able to go back and go online and within 20 hours use the computer to be able to and by the way, this system helps elevate and helps bring them up to the next level, and then retake it, and then hopefully achieve the the next level up that they're wanting in order to be qualified for that position. And it has worked. In fact, we have, like I said, high school students have taken it. Individuals have gone through the HRD system, have taken it or whatnot. So it's not a pass-fail. It just gives them just a basic understanding of where their level is at when it comes to math or certain the certain criterias. That's one. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Second question is, how was this compared to already
Oh.
the processes necessary to obtain certification from a vocational technical institution?
Those certifications are very specific. It's very job specific, and this is not replacing that. This is just one additional tool our human resources managers can use to assess what are the basic level math skills, reading comprehension skills, research. I think one is searching for information skills or whatnot. And these have been worked on for years, many years, as far as the basic criteria for a multitude of jobs that are recognized. And so there's this battery of a database of various jobs. So let's say that if a job, and again, this one is for entry-level positions. Entry-level positions. So if a person wants to come in as a clerk or wants to come in as a bookkeeper one or whatnot, those particular positions have their certain grade levels. Let's say a minimum of, for let's say bookkeeper one, it would require a person to come in at a minimum of a silver in math, research, and let's say reading comprehension. And just because a person comes in with an accounting degree, for those of us who are accountants or whatnot, know that just because we have an accounting degree does not necessarily mean that we have some of the other basic levels of skills in order to achieve, to be successful in the job place. But again, going back to answer your question, it does not replace the testings of, let's say, what is the rigorous testing that would be required of certain skilled positions or certain positions that require certain skills like police officers, whatnot. That's totally different. This is just a very basic minimum assessment of an individual. Are they able to meet meet the grade per se of the basic tasks that this position would entail. So it does not replace it. It just gives the HR person an additional tool. So when a person comes in, and if there's 3 applicants who are, let's say, they all come in with the same kind of certification, maybe one have more years of experience than the other or whatnot, one has more years of work experience, one graduated from another vocational technical institute that was probably more highly recognized versus the other. This tool will kind of help assess, especially those who just come straight out of college or straight out of training, kind of helps the employer identify, will this person be able to sit down at the job or walk around or do whatever in the job with the basic necessary skills. Because right then and there, when a person hires, all they have right there is just a certification sheet, what the person says to them, what a recommendation says to them, but nothing that shows that this person has been able to demonstrate that they're qualified, that they're skilled. And that's what this gives. And like I said, agencies have recognized the value of this, and they've used it for hiring. Private companies throughout Guam have recognized it and continues to use it, which is why places like Guam Community College continues to provide this program because many companies are using it to help identify the best qualified for hiring. And I'm not saying that we don't have them in our government. All I'm saying is that this is just a tool that our HR people can use to handpick, and then you would never have to they would never have to confront the argument that of nepotism or anything like that. It'll be based on these kind of criteria, and so this is just another tool that our HR managers can use. Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
It actually does, but it leads to the next question that I have. And I guess I'm just stuck on this on line 12. It says, shall be required for consideration. And I see the intent, and I also agree with the intent, and is try to get the best skilled person. And a lot of times, that skill is, there's you can get it one of two ways. You can get it by either being book smart or street smart. But that said, is that if this is a tool, and I'm just looking at this very broad statement here, shall be required for consideration. You're requiring it to consider it. And so an argument can be made that, yes, we required it, we considered it, yet we still chose it. We chose otherwise. And I don't mean to sound cynical with regards to, what may happen versus the intent. But I believe that if we're going to require this, there has to be a little bit more than just for consideration. I do believe if you're going to have an assessment, and if it's run down to 3 individuals, and as a result of this assessment, based, and again, you can have an individual who's been on the job for 20 years, okay? But an individual who just got on the job probably has more technical knowledge and can do the job better than that individual, or vice versa. Okay? And I'm sure that this assessment will be able to meet that out. But then what do you do with that information? Okay? Do you use that as a criteria? Or is it just a consideration? And so there's where I'm a little I'm stuck here. And maybe I'm reading too far into it. But if you take a step back and you read the whole section in totality, granted that there is now another tool that can be utilized is, I for one, I've got a toolbox at home with a bunch of tools, screwdrivers and wrenches and whatnot. And just the other day I was looking at one piece of tool that I bought about 4 or 5 years ago. I never used it. So it's nice to have the tool, but is it going to be used, and is it going to be used for the purposes for the intent that it has? I don't have anything against the intent. So I just want to make sure that the intent is not confused with just having another tool in the toolbox. Let's use the tool. And let's use the tool, so that we can maximize and we can optimize the individuals that we're going to have, that they're going to have want to be employed. And again, I may be reading too far into this, but I see that while we require it, it's required for consideration. Okay? It's like requiring me to have a screwdriver in my toolbox but not being able to use it. And I want to be able to use it. So, again, I'm not bringing this as a point of objection. I'm bringing this as a point of wanting to make this stronger so that that we recognize the intent of this and we utilize that. Okay, so, and I guess in further discussion, whatever discussions that we have, that I'll work with legal counsel and also with the author to see how we can strengthen that. I believe that we need to strengthen that. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak on this measure. Particularly in light of the previous speaker, I believe that this particular measure doesn't require us to determine the hiring practice based on the information that we glean from a skills assessment, but rather would allow the human resource administrators, managers, coordinators get a fuller picture of the qualities, the talent, the skills that these beginning employees bring. When they, a nationally assessed system or test, a program, has validity, has reliability to it, so that when they see the results, they know indeed that, in this particular case, that where this person ranks as far as math or technology, business writing, listening, locating information, working well with others, reading for information, performance, talent, and an actual fit into whatever it is they're trying to gain employment. It's a beginning point. It is another set of eyes or ears to how well this applicant is. As well, Madam Speaker, what this also does for the human relations, human resource unit is, as they read about this applicant and as they read about their assessment, their experience, their schooling, their training, there might be other jobs that we are trying to fill that perhaps maybe this particular job that you put an application in for, you're suited, but you're, my goodness gracious, you're even better suited for these other jobs. And so you're able to see these assessments. And of course, I stand with pride about what a previous speaker said about current preparation programs and current training programs. But I think such a skills assessment program does is it ties it all together. And currently, as we move into the 21st century, or as we are here, there are certain skills that would help us move forward, would help us ensure that we're even better prepared to do well in the workforce. And these kinds of assessment descriptors helps us better identify our human capital, what they bring, and then further, what they need strengthening in. So for me, this is really a summary assessment of everything, and it ties it together. And while I would like to say that we already have this in place through preparation programs, through standards, at the Department of Education, for example, I know that we don't. I know that we hire folks to come and work with our children, and through staffing positions, aid positions, people work with us in our cafeteria. Those are all very important positions that they will sit and tell you where they've worked before, what kind of training programs, but there's really not an assessment program to tell us that they do know how to read, use technology, work well with others, you know, are open to diversity, and those are all critical components to human capital. So I think this is, and this doesn't say that this skills assessment component is going to say whether you're hired or not. What this bill proffers is that this will be, as the previous speaker said, one of the tools that will help us better understand whom we are going to be investing in our government. And so I really think this measure, Bill number 466-31, really is a step in the right direction. I really do think it's going to help us with accountability, with cost effectiveness, with cost efficiency. I think it would help us align our human capital efforts with our preparation programs and our training programs. And it would help ensure that our human resources people are picking and identifying people who would be on payroll to help meet the mission and help realize the visions that all the various agencies and organizations are work hard towards. So thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in full support of Bill number 466-31, and I thank the author of this measure for proffering it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator Yamashita. On the motion, Senator Mabini, would you like to close, or you want to send it down?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate my colleagues in helping to improve and clarify portions of the bill. Again, the intent of the bill is to provide our HR managers, our employers, our agencies to have a tool to help them decide how to best maximize their limited funding when it comes to personnel. And I hope that, and I'm very hopeful, very confident that a bill like that, once this, and if this comes into law, that our government would be better able to manage the limited resources that we have. So I hope I get the support of my colleagues on Bill 46631. I asked to have it moved to the third reading file. Is that right? Is that
So to be sent to the third reading file on that motion without any objections, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. I'd like to recognize Senator Rodriguez on substitute bill number 492.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 492 on a third reading. Be allowed to briefly discuss it.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 492 is pretty simple. It's an act relative to providing compensation to commissioners of the Guam Public Utilities Commission. Madam Speaker, early last year, the commission had approached me and asked me to entertain a proposal from them to see how they could establish a compensation that will not really compensate them for what their true responsibilities and duties are. Because we know that the workload of commissioners on the Public Utilities Commission is really very extensive. They oversee their regulatory body that oversees 6 utilities, 6 and including telecom, which includes 6 different companies. And so in the past, Madam Speaker, the commission met on a quarterly basis, but for many years, or for very recently, because of their workload increase, meets about once or twice a month. In addition to internal committee meetings, they have meetings with consultants and a lot of extensive review of documents and material to help them make the best possible decisions as commissioners. The initial bill, Madam Speaker, that I introduced had it where we would set the compensation for commissioners to be $1,000 a month. The substituted version that was reported out amended the bill to say that the commissioners would be receiving $300 per meeting, but not to exceed $900 a month. And in all due respect to the committee, I don't think it's the right message or the right way or right approach in handling this, because although they already meet about twice a month now, it just gives that impression that you got to meet, if you want that $1,000 compensation, you have to meet twice a month. And so as I said earlier, this really is, this amount of $1,000 is minimal. It's not. It's a token compensation for these commissioners. And so before I move to amend the bill to revert back to the original submission, I just like to be able to share that during the public hearing of this measure, the big question, of course, came up whether what impact this would have on the increase of fees in any of the agencies that they oversee. And we were assured that this would not have any impact in terms of justification for a rate increase. And that was one of my initial concerns as well when the commission had approached me. But I feel very confident and reassured by members of the commission that this minimal amount of $1,000 that we are going to provide for commissioners will not justify a rate increase or even a request for a rate increase. It was said that this type of fee is like any business, any government operation where it's part of the cost of doing business. And so I want to ask my colleagues to please support me in establishing this compensation. You know, for the past many years, this is a seven-member commission, and we've only had 5 members of the public who have been impaneled, and so at times also it makes it difficult to reach a quorum. And hopefully, with this token compensation, Madam Speaker, it would entice our citizens of our community to, look forward to at least a little something, because we know we were given a glimpse of what it takes, what kind of packet these commissioners are required to review before a meeting. And so, just hoping that this small token compensation would increase the participation of our of members of our community to want to be able to serve in the PUC. And so, with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to make an amendment on page 2 of the bill, on section 2, on sub-item K. It reads, "Commissioners shall be compensated at the rate of," to strike out $300, and to amend it by saying, reverting it back to $1,000 per month. And so we're striking out $300 per meeting for their services, and substituting it for at the rate of $1,000 per month, period.
Okay, on the amendment, if everyone would understand, although there are 2 different numbers, it's just to take out 300 in written form and numerical form and make it $1,000 per month. On the amendment. Any objections? No objections? So ordered. Senator, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and that would conclude my amendments on this bill.
You're welcome. On the motion, Senator Guthridge, you're recognized.
You know, when the bill came up informally and we're discussing it, I can understand the value of the Public Utilities Commission and the members of the commission. They work very hard. They have consultants that guide them on rate reviews and petitions. But they do work very hard. I have some colleagues of mine from the university from before who serve on this commission. And I know it's a very demanding kind of responsibility. But you know, Madam Speaker, at the same time, there are other boards and commissions of this government that are equally demanding of their members. And I've often thought about this in terms of the Department of Education and the Board of Education. Those folks deal with an awful lot. They meet continuously as they are obligated to resolve many, many policy issues facing the Department of Education. And we've seen what they need to do in order to ensure that the work of the department moves forward. And I'm not comfortable simply recognizing the commitments and energy of the PUC members and ignoring other entities that equally require a lot of work from the board members. So I would like to amend this to start this initiative to properly recognize other boards, and I'd like to amend it to include at this time the Board of Education of the Department of Education. We've talked about this here before, that one of the challenges that we have at DOE is encouraging representatives from the community to want to serve on the Board of Education. And just as the sponsor of this bill has said, it recognizes the work in some way, some small way, of
Point of
those that are
information,
committed to the work of the PUC.
Point of information.
And
Point to, please state your point.
I understand, madam. I think that there is and I have to agree that there has to be, that they should be recognized. The bill, though, is specific because it addresses a specific provision just on the PUC. To add on, the Board of Education, it's going to affect another provision that is not currently being addressed in this bill.
Your point is well taken. We're going to take a brief recess.
I want to amend this bill.
We left off, I know, with Senator Gutherts and, so Senator Gutherts and we can, I know we took a brief recess because of the direction in which you were going with your amendment.
Well, Madam Speaker, if your belief is that, of course, the amendment's not germane, I'll accept that. However, I wish to point out, with due respect, and I appreciate the work of the chairman of this committee and the author of this particular bill. It sets a very bad precedent at this point in time. If you do it for one, and you're not recognizing the work done on other boards, I think that creates a credibility issue. At the same time, with all the doom and gloom about the cost of this government, knowing that we have yet to meet some of our obligations and commitments because of cash problems, to entities that already are supposed to benefit from certain things by law, including the law enforcement community. And we're going to do this, just because the money's there. I think it creates a credibility problem for the legislature. Thank you.
Senator Guthers, I do appreciate your comments, but I think what would also help for you, I don't think you're aware of this, and legal counsel was able to pull it out, is that the board members for DOE do receive $250 for their meeting and $500 a month. So it's, they're, by law at least, that's the amount that was set for the board. So on the motion, Senator Rodriguez, is there anybody else? So Senator Rodriguez, you may close.
Okay, we'll just put it down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so yes, because on that, of course, that amendment of the $1,000 did pass. So on the motion then to send Bill 492 to the third reading file without any objection, so ordered. We're going to take a recess until 1 this afternoon.